Over the years, Hyundai hasn't had the best of reputations within the automotive industry. Not because they make bad cars, but because they make some of the cheapest cars on the market. The Hyundai Elantra, for example, starts at just $21,625, which is even cheaper than the Toyota Camry. But I guess you could say that price is all that Hyundai has going for them. While it might be cheaper to buy a Hyundai upfront, over the long term, they were known to be a money pit due to poor reliability and longevity. As such, the vast majority preferred to buy Japanese cars, which were not only economical but also reliable. And Hyundai was only able to attract buyers who were only focused on price. It was a similar story with their Korean brother, Kia. Kia not only had a similar crappy reputation, but they straight up went bankrupt back in the late 90s. And it was actually Hyundai who bailed them out. Clearly, Hyundai and Kia have had a pretty rocky history, but over the past couple of years, these two have done better than ever. Month after month, Hyundai and Kia are setting records in terms of EV sales thanks to the Ioniq and EV series. And it's not even like these cars are particularly cheap. The Ioniq 6 starts at $37,500 and the EV6 starts at $42,600. So it's not just price that's moving units for Hyundai and Kia. It seems that people actually like these vehicles. This is especially impressive given the current context of the EV market. Most legacy automakers are stepping back from EVs. Mercedes-Benz is completely ditching the EQ lineup, Ford is slowing production of EVs, GM is going back to hybrids, and as for the Japanese automakers, well, they never really entered the full EV market to begin with. Even Tesla is struggling to show year-over-year growth, and EV startups like Rivian and Lucid are just trying not to go bankrupt. So here's how the Korean brands were able to overcome their rocky history and make a name for themselves in the new automotive industry. To understand how Hyundai and Kia were able to make a comeback, we first have to understand why people hated these cars in the first place. I think there's two main issues that plagued Korean cars, starting with price. This might sound a bit counterintuitive. Usually, people are looking for the best bargains they can get. So you would think that a cheaper a car is, the better. But that's not actually the case. While people do want the cheapest products possible, they're also highly suspicious of the cheapest products. Naturally, they wonder why just one brand or company is cheaper. Is there something wrong with it? Is it less reliable? Is everyone else just charging more just because they can? Lots of questions arise, and that's just half the problem. There's also a massive branding mountain to work through. Even if you're able to make phenomenal cars at cheap prices, you still need to work through the branding stigma, which is much easier said than done. This is precisely why brands like Payless shoe stores have such a tough time building a business. If you're not familiar with Payless, they do exactly what their name suggests. They offer good quality shoes without the massive markups or marketing spend, meaning that their shoes are way cheaper than the competition. But this has also turned into their biggest obstacle. While there's nothing inherently wrong with their shoes, people don't want them simply because they don't want to look cheap. Payless actually ran a super cool experiment to prove this a couple of years ago. They rebranded one of their stores to look super modern and sleek, and they marked up their shoes a bunch, and all of a sudden, everyone wanted them. This isn't to say that cheap brands can never make it, but it's much harder for them to break in. And this is especially the case when you're not just the cheap brand, but your products also suck, which brings us into Hyundai's second main issue. Their cars sucked. And we're not talking about aesthetic issues or quality issues, we're talking about fundamental issues such as unreliable engines. In fact, the #1 complaint about Hyundai cars over the years has been unreliable engines. For more context, Hyundai has issued mass recalls and faced class action lawsuits regarding their engines. So yeah, it was bad. And if you didn't get hit with an engine issue, it was more than likely that you'd be hit with a transmission issue, as this was the second most common issue with Hyundais. In other words, the two most common issues with Hyundais had to do with the two most important parts of a car, the engine and the transmission. Hyundais also had issues with the electrical system, the steering system, and the fueling system. Sometimes the brakes would cause fires, and other times the door handles would just come off. To be honest, we could talk about the pitfalls of Hyundais for a full video, but the bottom line is that their cars were not only cheap, but they sucked. Hyundai had plenty of work to do in terms of turning around the company, and they started off with branding. In 2015, they decided to spin off their higher-end lineup called Genesis into its own luxury brand. They basically took a bunch of inspiration from Aston Martin and ditched the Hyundai branding for their higher-end vehicles. This was really just a semantical difference, but it made all the difference. People had a tough time justifying going with a Hyundai over a Toyota and dealing with all the reliability issues just to save a few $1,000s up front. But when the comparison was between a $59,000 Genesis GB80 and a $100,000 luxury SUV, the cost savings were far more tangible. The new branding also gave the lineup a far better shot at success, similar to what Toyota did with the Lexus. While high-end Toyotas and the Lexuses may fundamentally be the same thing, the general public does not view them as the same thing. It's a similar story with Hyundai and Genesis. People are much more likely to accept Genesis as a luxury offering as opposed to just higher-end Hyundais. And I'd argue that Hyundai has done a pretty good job with Genesis. Genesis has very much become a household name over the past several years. At one point, there were even rumors that Apple was going to use Hyundai to produce the Apple car. Clearly, Hyundai has come a long way in terms of branding, but the factor that really put all of this into overdrive was EVs. There were two sides to the Hyundai EV puzzle. On one hand, EVs made reliability much easier to achieve. One of the selling points of EVs is the fact that they have fewer moving parts, so fewer things can go wrong. This is especially useful for Hyundai, who had a difficult time producing reliable engines and transmissions, neither of which are relevant in EVs. So the EV trend very much helped with Hyundai's reliability concerns, but more importantly, Hyundai and Kia were able to shine as the budget EV options. Here's the thing, everyone else is making luxury EVs. Ford and GM are making things like the F-150 Lightning and the Hummer EV. Rivian and Lucid are making $100,000 vehicles, and it's the same thing with Audi, BMW, and Mercedes. When it comes to budget EVs, there really aren't that many options. You've just got the Tesla Model 3, the Volkswagen ID4, and maybe the Ford Mustang Mach-E. The Mustang branding only appeals to some people though, and Volkswagen's reputation has been fried since Dieselgate. So there's really no budget EV options from the legacy players. Usually, this void would have been filled by the Japanese automakers, Toyota, Honda, and Nissan. But they've not only been slow to adopt fully electric vehicles, but they've actually been lobbying against them because they want to push hydrogen vehicles instead. And this has given Hyundai and Kia the perfect opportunity. Hyundai is investing $50 billion into EVs, and they're not launching out their EVs like the EQS or the Cybertruck. Instead, they're just putting out regular-looking cars that just happen to be hybrid or electric. They're basically saying, if you want a no-thrills electric Toyota, come to us. And it looks like this is exactly what the general public is looking for. So far, we've mainly focused on things that Hyundai has done from their side to shift sentiment. But the reality is that much of the previous struggles of Korean brands and their recent rise has less to do with the brands themselves and more to do with how industries evolve in general. In fact, the automotive industry is just one of the many industries where we've seen this sort of evolution. Likely the best example of this is the electronics industry, and more specifically, the TV market. Back in the day, Western TV makers like Philips and RCA dominated the market because these brands controlled the innovation pipeline. They invented color TVs and flat-screen TVs, while their Eastern counterparts were struggling to even reverse engineer this tech. But eventually, TV innovation did slow down and consumers started caring more about price and reliability. This led to the rise of Japanese brands like Sony, Sanyo, Toshiba, Sharp, and Hitachi. These guys dominated throughout the 2000s, but moving into the 2010s, consumers started expecting another tier of value, leading us to the rise of Korean brands, Samsung and LG. You could argue that the TV market is now even moving one step further, where TVs are basically sold at cost, leading to the rise of Chinese brands like TCL and Hisense. Zooming out and putting the nationalities aside, over time the TV industry basically got passed down the manufacturing line. It got closer and closer to manufacturers, and at this point, we're basically direct to consumer. The exact same thing happened with the computer industry as well. We went from IBM and Xerox to HP and Dell to Toshiba and Sony to Lenovo, Acer, and Asus. And if you're thinking of some industry where this didn't happen, I would challenge you to dig deeper. For example, it might seem like GE is still doing well in the appliance industry, but this is misleading. GE's appliance business has actually been owned and operated by a Chinese conglomerate since 2016. So basically every industry naturally moves closer and closer to manufacturers as markets eliminate margins. And this is precisely what we're seeing in the automotive industry as well. It's just taking a lot longer to play out given the complexity of cars. Before the 1980s, the American automotive industry was dominated by Ford, GM, and Chrysler. Over the past 50 years, we've seen the rise of Toyota, Honda, and Nissan, and now we're starting to see a trend towards Hyundai and Kia. But I would argue that even this is not the end. We probably have one more trend ahead towards Chinese automakers like BYD, Xiaomi, and NIO. These guys are already killing it in their home market. BYD, for example, is currently the third largest automaker in the world, only behind Tesla and Toyota. Despite their success though, Western buyers don't really consider Chinese automakers because they view them the same way they viewed Korean brands back in the 2000s. The Chinese automakers are well aware of this and they have plenty of growth left in their home market itself. So they're not even considering pursuing Western markets at this point, but give it 10, 15, 20 years and Western sentiment towards Chinese vehicles may be a lot better. That's still a ways out though, and in the meantime, it seems that Korean automakers are the ones that are in. Which car brand do you prefer? Comment that down below. Also, if you're interested in deeper dives, interviews with insiders, and exclusive tech analysis, consider subscribing to our free weekly newsletter. But until then, I'm Hari, and I'll see you guys on the next one.